Hi guys, hi, how's it going? How are you doing today? Hopefully today finds you well. Today I am doing the next palette review in my palette roulette series, in which I pick a palette that is in my collection that might also be in your collection, and I utilize it for a week. And then I come back to you and I talk to you about my findings, show you some pictures. We typically do live swatches, and then we pull another palette. So I hope that sounds like something that you're interested in. For those of you new here today, hi, my name is Donna. I'm so happy to have you here today. I am a lover of all things high-end, colorful beauty and self-care. I also work in the beauty industry as a district leader for Ulta Beauty, and I get a lot of education in my job about the brands, the people, the things that I'm putting on my face and my skin and my body. So I do like to bring you that education as well. I hope that you're here for it. If you are, please consider subscribing to the channel before you go. I'm trying to hit 1,000 subscribers this year. We have a lot of newness here on this channel. I appreciate all of you for being here today. So happy to have new friends to talk to down in the comment section, as well as the ride or dies that are in my life. And I just kind of like to chit chat about makeup. So I pick you, Pikachu, because you also, if you're here, like to talk about makeup. So I hope that you enjoy yourself here. I hope that you find that this channel brings as much solace to your soul as it does to mine. And let's jump into this review. All right, friends, today we are actually reviewing two palettes. We're reviewing the Colourpop Garden Variety palette as well as the Marc Jacobs Electric palette. When I come to you and do two palettes at a time, I like to do it like one and then the other so that you get a good idea versus like really comparing them against each other. But you will see like some comparisons made, obviously. These two palettes were in my collection, have been in my collection for quite some time. And we're going to start with Garden Variety. So this is the Garden Variety palette. You can see that the packaging on it is really pretty. It's got some corals, some pops of purples, some deeps in there. Really beautiful, like sage minty green on it. It is tactile. So the decorations or the motif on this palette is raised. You can feel that in, by feeling it. And I think I mentioned this before, but there was a channel that I watched a long time ago that had a girl on it as not like she ran the channel, but it was an interview. And she is a channel here on YouTube who is a beauty guru who is also blind. And she said that these kind of palettes with the raised or the words on the palette that are kind of indented are really super awesome for her, because you can kind of feel the top of the palette, and your senses come to life when you're blind, of course, but you can tell which palette it is that you're going into just by the feel of the palette. So I always appreciate, since watching that, I always appreciate when there are palettes out there on the market that do have that tactile nature to them, so that it becomes a palette that is paying attention to places in the market that might not be paid attention to very often. And this is the back of the palette. And the back of the palette does just have like the information about the palette on it. It has the little circles in it to tell you what the shades are in the palette, and it has the same motif on the back as it does on the front. I did think that it was really cute that it has like these like little blooms here to make certain shadows differentiate from the others as far as the back of the palette, and kind of create a semblance between those circles being there and the palette motif itself. But those three they're not indicative of anything special with whatever shade that is going on, as far as I could tell. The inside of the palette looks like this. It does have that motif on the front of or on the top of it, and it is tactile, as is the rest of the palette. There is no mirror, and this is the color story in the palette. As you can see, it's got a really pretty pastel, like almost in nature earth tones. It does come in at 5 stars on the Colourpop website with 73 reviews on it. It is a $20 palette that has 0.60 ounces of product or 0.04 ounces per pan of product, which is pretty standard for a palette in Colourpop's range. It was launched in summer of 2020 and it is a cruelty-free product. There is 15 pans of shadows in here and it is labeled as a vibrant pop of color and rich earth tone palette. I by no means think that this is vibrant pops of color. I by no means think that this is vibrant. With that said, there are 3 different formulas in here. So you do have mattes, you do have, well, I guess 4 really. You have mattes, you have shimmers, you have one Colourpop eyeshadow, which is this one here. It's called Don't Leaf. And then you have the good old matte with glitter formula that Colourpop is so good at placing in palettes. It does say that there are 6 mattes, 7 shimmers, and 2 glitter mattes, but I think that that is inaccurate. I think this one, this one, this one, and this one are all 4 glitter mattes in my humble opinion. And the reason why I say that is because these 3 could almost pass off as a shimmer. Most of the glitter does stay with transition onto the eyelid until you start blending it out, and then the glitter doesn't stay. If it's a wet shadow going over a sticky base, then yes, the glitter is going to stay for these 3 shadows. This one, the glitter, there's no purpose for the glitter to be on that. I think that you all know how I feel about glitter mattes, and if you don't, I think that they're worthless. I think that there is no point to them. It's just filler in a shadow that doesn't need to be present, especially if it's not going to go onto your eye in the way that they intend it to in the shadow. It doesn't make any sense to me, and Colourpop does it all the damn time. All the damn time. I just don't see any point to them. Realistically, I think that you have, you know, mattes, shimmers, glitter mattes, and one Colourpop Super Shock shadow in here. The Colourpop Super Shock shadow, if you don't know it's a Super Shock shadow, it kind of takes you by surprise, because when you dip into it, it isn't going to have that like powderiness that the entirety of the rest of the palette has. And it's going to kind of move in the pan versus flake off, right? I did find that because I didn't realize that it was a Super Shock shadow before I went into it, I did dig into it a little bit harder the first time I went in. My eye look had a lot of like the packed on Super Shock into it, and that did kind of flake off as the day went along. But because I realized it was a Super Shock in that moment, from that time forward, every time I used it, I used my finger, and it definitely goes on better with your finger. Most Super Shocks do. I think that primer with this palette is a must. If you want any kind of longevity out of the shadows, you're going to need to use a primer. If you want the glitter from the shimmers to stick to your eyelid, you're going to need to use a tacky base or a very wet brush. And even if you use a wet brush, if you go to blend at all, that glitter is going to fall out all over your face. This palette was very, very dry. The shadows in it created a lot of kick up in the pan. The shadows in it also created a lot of fallout on your face. So if you're not into fallout, this is probably not the palette for you, because there is a lot, it's imminent with this palette. It did last on my eyes a good 6 to 8 hours. I do think that that is appropriate and a really good wear time for, you know, most eyeshadows. I have eyeshadows that last longer on my eyes, and I have eyeshadows that last far less time on my eyes. I would say though that without a primer, this doesn't last much longer than about 5 hours. And because of the color story of this, a lot of the shadows in this palette did not show up even on my skin, and I am a pale princess. So I would be hesitant to believe that this is a very great palette for even a smidge bit deeper skin tone than mine. This color didn't show up at all on my skin tone. I tried to blend it. It became my transition color because it just didn't show up at all on my skin tone. They all swatch very, very well though. So with that being said, words of wisdom here, do not rely on a swatch to tell you whether it's going to work for you or not. This shadow did work for me, but this was one of the ones that also had a lot of glitter in it, and it was very pale, so I also used it a lot more as a transition or a blending out kind of shade than I did anything else. I really loved the shimmers in this palette, the true shimmers. So these 3 here This one here and this one here, I feel are true shimmers, and I really did enjoy them, but they are more of a wash of color versus like a impactful bam in your face kind of shimmer. So if you're looking for an in your face kind of shimmer, the only one of those that's in here really is this Super Shock, and it's only going to be in your face if you utilize your finger and just kind of pat it on versus swiping it onto your lid or trying to blend it out in any way. The darkest shade in this palette is this brown. It is blended into my eye look today, and I really enjoyed this brown. This is probably the most used over the last week. I really honestly liked this purple too, but I do think that it could have been a lot more deep, and that would have given a lot more depth to this palette that doesn't exist. But with that said, I understand why it's so light, because everything else in this palette is really on the lighter side. Deserted was the best of the shadows in this palette, I felt like, and that is this one over here. It's just a really gorgeous white. It was the best brow bone shade. It's very matte, kind of peachy white, so it leans on the warm end versus the cool end. It's not super stark. It isn't what is in my brow bone today, but it is one of the shadows that I used quite often for my brow bone almost the entire week. That one and this brown over here, those were the two that I loved the most, honestly. And they are just straight up mattes. Overall, this was a really easy to work with palette. It was really easy to use. It blended really beautifully. I would just say that my problems with this palette, and I think that we knew this going in, if I remember correctly, last week when I pulled it in, I was like, meh, I don't know if I want it. And then it kind of became the add-on to this palette instead of the other way around. I really did enjoy it. It was fun to try out the different formulas in this palette and just figure out what I liked about it and what I didn't like about it. It is a really beautiful color story. I really love this green. It's such a beautiful green. It's very sagey. I love also that most of the colors that show up on here are reminiscent of what's going on in the palette. It really speaks to that. What I think that the palette is missing that is all over this, you know, outer carton is this like tealy blue shade. I really think it could have used some blue. I don't think it lacks depth per se, but I do think it lacks more depth than it has right now. I found myself partnering this one with it an awful lot just for the deeper tones, like the black in this and even this brown, kind of giving it a little bit of a rosy spin to this dark brown here. But it didn't bother me even that these two shadows were those glitter mattes, because unless I wanted that glitter to stay on my eyes, it didn't stay on my eyes, so I could use them as mattes. What did bother me though is the amount of fallout that this palette had. Now, I am not one that looks at a palette and hears that it has fallout and says, that's a deal breaker for me. That's never been. One of my favorite brands is ABH, and they're Fallout Central. So fallout is not a make or break point for me, but the fact that this fell out as much as it did and continued to fall out throughout the day. These two, the glitter didn't stay on my face or on my eye as I blended the colors out. But because they're mattes with glitters, that glitter fell straight onto my face and it was hard pressed to pull all of the glitter off. I also didn't find that there was much impact going on in this palette, so I did pull in a lot of my Cliona shadows for the lid shade in the shadows that are in the looks that you're probably seeing right now. And that wasn't here, you know, good, bad, or indifferent. I love using my Cliona shadows, but I wish I could have gotten the impact that I wanted to out of just this palette. I would say it's worth the $20 that they're charging for it. I don't think 0.04 ounces per pan is a bad weight for each one of the pans in this palette. I think that $20 is actually doable, and Colourpop really has some great pigmentation. Like, their pigmentation is usually pretty great. I think that my skin tone is just a smidge bit too dark for a lot of the shadows in here to show up on my skin. So that's what I have to say about this guy. Let's move on to the Marc Jacobs. So The Marc Jacobs Electric palette is a palette that I picked up actually at TJ Maxx for like $19.99, but it typically is a $49.50 eyeshadow palette. That's a lot. It has 0.21 ounces of product in it, or 0.03 ounces of product per pan. And just to put it into perspective for you, these pans are, you know, weight-wise smaller than these pans, but they look bigger. So that's a little bit of a, like, we're fooling you kind of mindset. What I love about Marc Jacobs, let's look at this palette first of all. Do you guys see all that glitter? Oh my God, that is so, so pretty. This launched for holiday 2019, so that's why all the like glitter packaging and the prettiness to it. The back of the palette just shows what each one of the shades in the palette looks like and gives you some information on the palette itself. What I love about Marc Jacobs palettes, these little 7-pan palettes, is that the shadows in the palettes make a sentence if you read them across. So starting here, we've got rock out, feel the rhythm glittering the stage in stardust tonight. How crazy, that is so cool. So let's read it real fast without looking at it. Rock out. Feel the rhythm glittering the stage in stardust tonight. I just love that about Marc Jacobs. I think it's kind of cool and kind of cute and kind of quirky and you know, is all the things that makes Marc Jacobs special. But these shadows come in this wonderful plastic container. It does have a mirror on it. There are 7 shadows, and these are what the shadows look like. This was a lot more cool tone in nature than I really thought it was just by looking at it. But it was a limited edition for holiday release, like I said, in 2019. There are 7 shadows in here. 4 of them are mattes, 3 of them are shimmers, and the shadow names read as a sentence going across. These are super pigmented and blendable. Even the black is blendable. It is a little more finicky than the other ones, but it is a beautiful black, and it does blend very well. I have an eye look where I actually put black in the crease and blended it up and then packed it into the outer V, and I really didn't mind it. It wasn't a bad shadow blended out. It performed like a black where it needed to, and then it performed like a gray where it needed to. Wonderful smoking out kind of black shadow, because while it is a little more finicky, it does blend out beautifully. It doesn't get patchy. A lot of blacks get super patchy. There was very little fallout with this palette, even with the shimmers. I do think that this one here this one is in Stardust. I do think that this one here did lend a little bit to fallout on my under eye. From the glitter perspective, it was a lot more sheer of a base. It had like this like almost baby pink base, but it had pink and like silver and like blue glitters to it that I could find all over my face when I used it. So not super impressed with that. Don't like it when that falls out all over my face all throughout the day, and I do think that that shadow did that, but the other ones didn't. This silver, what crazy awesome silver. It was crazy. I had a really hard time figuring out how to use that shadow in an eye look because it didn't look great any other way but on the lid, and I wasn't gonna put it on. I wasn't gonna put it on my lid. I needed it to go in my inner corner, and it just wasn't working out so hot. So I did have a really hard time like figuring out what to do with that shadow, right? I didn't go anywhere. If it were like a night on the town, I absolutely would do like a black outer V and a black like blend out the black and silver eyelid kind of look, but I didn't go anywhere. I stayed in my pajamas almost the entire week, except for changing my shirt to be business on top, casual pajamas on bottom. Did a lot of virtual visits last week. So yeah, it works great. I think that it does work better with a primer on it than not, and I think that that just helps with the blend of it. I did find on a dry eye, I don't think that it blended quite as well as I saw that it was blending with primer. But I do think that it functions without a primer, whereas with this one, I'm not sure you're going to get any kind of latitude from it without a primer. This one did show up very pigmented with one and without one. It did last pretty long on my eyes. It lasted around that 8 to 9 hour mark on my eyes with or without a primer. So I'm not certain that you need a primer with it, except for the blendability factor. I did think that it blended a lot better with a primer than I didn't. No noticeable fallout with that one, except for that one shade. I felt like it was a really good palette. Do I think that these palettes are worth $49.50? I don't know that that even matters anymore, because I do believe Marc Jacobs Beauty is no longer a thing. So would I have paid $49.50 for this palette? No. I do have two Marc Jacobs palettes. This one is one of them, and then I think the other one is Flamboyant. And I didn't pay full price for either one of those because I just wouldn't. I am also, though, of the belief that you should never pay full price for anything. Everything goes on sale at some point. There's always a coupon at some point. Wait until you can get it on a discount. Always. That is my thought process. So I like expensive things. I don't want to pay the price for it. With that said, I am happy that I do have this in my collection. I do think it is a beautiful eyeshadow palette, and I do think that if you can get it on a discount, if you can get it at all anymore, check your local TJ Maxx's and your local Marshalls and those kind of stores, because they always have something Marc Jacobs in them, and you might get lucky and find one of these palettes. Like I said, I got it for 20 bucks. So I do like both of the palettes, but I do like this one a little bit more. I'm not sure that this one would make it through a declutter in my collection, but I am going to hold on to it until that declutter, because I don't know. I kind of am on the fence with this. Like, I liked it, but at the same time, I didn't like it, if that makes any sense. I'm going to hold on to it, see how I feel more about the shimmers, because really that'll be what makes or breaks me with this palette. I really do like that green shimmer in there. And this purple one honestly isn't super bad. And this purple one honestly isn't super bad. So, like, and the orange one, the orange Super Shock, isn't super bad. Like, that is what would make or break me on this palette. So I am going to pay some more attention to the shimmers in this palette and decide whether I'm going to keep it beyond that. So these are the two palettes that I had for a review this week. I would be interested to know your thoughts on those palettes if you have them. And with that said, I'm going to go pick another palette and we will be right back. All right, friends, I totally forgot about this palette. I forgot I brought it in. Doing my inventory over the last couple weeks really reminded me of the palettes that I had still in my collection to utilize throughout this palette roulette series, but also what palettes I had in my collection that I totally forgot about.
I am going to do the Ace Beauty. Oh, I just dropped it.
I am going to do the Ace Beauty Blossom Passion palette for the review next week. Just one palette next week. Although looking at it, I do think that I'm going to need to pull in some singles on the neutral side, because the only neutral in here is this one, and I think it's more of a peach. This does look black in the screen. No, it doesn't. It kind of looks eggplanty. So this is a very like pink and purple and red and very Valentine's Day centric. I don't know what this is. I just realized that this shirt had this thing going on, so I'm sorry if you've had to stare at a stain on my shirt this whole damn video, but this is the palette that I will be utilizing next week, and I hope that you're here for it. I'm super excited about it, actually. I really love pinks and corals and purples, so some of my favorite colors to wear on my eyes, and now they just happen to also match my hair, so we are going to enjoy our time with this palette over the next week, and then come to you next Monday and talk to you about our fun times with this palette, and I hope I can count on you to be there. If that sounds like something you want to be apprised of, please do hit the subscribe button down there. Also hit the notification bell so that you're notified every single time I upload. I would love to have you along for this crazy ride of mine and welcome you in to this glorious YouTube fam, because I do have the best YouTube fam on the planet. With that said, I do hope that 2021 is treating you all kindly. I hope that you and yours are well, that you're good, that you're golden, that you're healthy, that you're getting along as best you can in this crazy chaotic world that we're living in right now. I hope your Valentine's Day is fantastic. Stay safe out there, everybody. Love each other, but love each other from afar. And until next time, bye, friends.